Does that answer? Anyone else want to respond?
Well, I think he's absolutely correct that the Constitution is almost no longer in effect because it's been legislated over, and we don't have people really enforcing it. The people that are supposed to be enforcing it are, in fact, violating it.
Very good. Craig, I appreciate it. Thank you for the call.
Well, thank you, Brent, for allowing me to comment. I just felt like I needed to make that statement. I truly believe that.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate hearing from you. Thanks again. 888-747-1968 if you'd like to join in. A question from the chat room. For the question for the panel. So this is for all three of you. Anybody who would care to answer, does a commercial lien done through an affidavit of truth process ever work with respect to, he's saying, I mean to control judges or cops? So I guess he's asking, does a commercial lien process through affidavit of truth ever successfully exert control over judges or cops?
No. In fact, it's worse than no. In every state in the union, and there's even a federal statute they've recently enacted, if you file any type of a lien on anybody else's property without a court judgment first, it's a felony in every state in the union. And it is also now a felony to file a lien against a federal judge. It's now a federal criminal offense. So, no, that one's it's a sure ticket to free room and board for several years.
All right. Thank you for that. Again, if you have any questions or comments from the chat room, let us know. We'll get them out to the panelists. Carolyn, everybody knows that tasers have become a major issue, not just here, all over the world. Tasers have become one of the most often used weapons in the police arsenal. People of all ages. We've had great-grandmothers who've been tasered. We've had little children with epilepsy who've been tasered in the head. And for the most ridiculous reasons. Because you did not obey me, for example. Or even earlier you heard, because a woman was sitting in a chair. Often it's just because they don't obey somebody's orders. Why isn't anything done about cops who are assaulting citizens for frivolous reasons, for just you didn't obey me? I mean, I'm not aware of any law that says that I have to obey a police officer. Carolyn.
Now, I don't know why anything isn't being done, and we've had a very notable situation in Seattle where a pregnant woman, Malika Brooks, in 2004 was driving her son to school and refused to sign a traffic ticket. And she was pregnant, and she was tasered 3 times while her arms were held behind her back. And the court found that this was legal and not in use of excessive force. So I can't understand this because, the idea behind the taser is basically that it's not a deadly weapon, which isn't true. If you have certain health conditions or, disabilities, it absolutely can be. And so, they're trying to say it's a lesser force than a baton or, obviously the gun perhaps, but there are other options available to a police officer. And I don't understand why, tasering somebody has become the norm for, disobedience to a police officer for something as, minuscule as refusing to sign a traffic ticket, which isn't even, an offense at all. It's not even a misdemeanor. It's nothing you can be jailed for, yet you can be tasered for it. There isn't a whole lot of accountability. The tasers are, being reviewed, supposedly, but they're still being used. And, in Ashland, Oregon, we had a Southern Oregon University student who was killed in 2006 by a taser with the Ashland Police Department of Oregon. And they never had an independent medical review, and the Jackson County, Oregon medical examiner pretty much said that he died of an overdose. And there's no accountability in a taser use, and they're using them inappropriately. I could see in a situation where you're choosing your gun or your taser, it might be appropriate, but they are being, used, quite frequently in inappropriate situations.
I remember a time that there were no tasers, and somehow the police managed to muddle through without them. If somebody didn't cooperate the way they wanted, they had other options. I recall that.
However, Brent, let me just be a little bit of a contrarian on this topic. I hear what you're saying, and I understand it. But sometimes that other option was the policeman being too quick with his baton, or worse, too quick with his gun. And there were times when misconduct happened, when there was no choice but deadly or more lethal force than the taser. I'm not a fan of the taser, and I'm certainly not a fan of the types of misconduct that you were talking about and that Carolyn was talking about. But for some good officers, and there are some good officers out there, it was a well-intended piece of non-lethal force that they could use for control of unruly individuals without going to something that could hurt them, be more of a casualty toward them. So, I'm not defending the taser company. I've got no stock in it. But at the same time, I think it is important that police officers have some form of non-lethal force they can use that doesn't maim or kill people. So I do see the intention behind the invention and advent of tasers in police work.
Except I think without realizing it, you just explained what the problem is. You said police used to, be too quick on the trigger and they'd shoot people who they shouldn't have. Police used to be too quick with the batons and they'd beat people who they shouldn't. Today, police are being too quick with the tasers and we have these problems. It sounds to me like the problem isn't the taser, the baton, or the gun. It's the police.
You're so right.
Now, Carolyn mentioned that, this situation with the woman who had her hands behind her back and she got tasered and she went into court and the court comes out and says the police were justified. By what stretch of the imagination does a court come through with such a ruling, and it's not an isolated ruling, when you have a helpless person being tasered?
Well, the first question, Brent, was this a federal court or a state court?
Carolyn?
This was a federal court in Seattle.
Okay. In Seattle, do you remember the name of the judge?
I do not have that information available to me at the moment.
Okay, because see, a lot of times what will happen with judges, both federal and state, is they think they're part of Team America. In other words, they think that, it's them against us. That's why we have appeals courts. And see, I don't know if this lady took her case to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. If she did, she'd have a better chance because the chief judge there, now Alex Kaczynski, probably the best federal judge in the United States. He actually seems to know what he's doing. It's more than you can say for most of them.
I remember another case that got a lot of attention on national media, and I can't remember all the details or the state it was in. But if I recall correct, it was a traffic stop involving an elderly grandmother who was tasered,
I think that was in Texas.
She was convicted of some misdemeanor or maybe C-level felony crime, and the officer who tasered her was found to be non-culpable for what he did. Though all of us saw it on TV, and it sure didn't look like justifiable force to me.
Mike, can you comment on that case?
Yeah, I can comment on cases like that in general. Here's one of the big problems that we've had is that in the 19th century, the late 19th century, if you were selected for jury duty, they could not ask you any type of embarrassing question. For example, have you been convicted of a felony? Now, Congress changed all that in 1965, which in turn took all the people who actually had experience in the legal system, the people who've actually been through the judicial meat grinder, who've done time in prison, done time in jail for felonies and that sort of things. And I need to tell you, there's tens of millions of us, okay? And what happens is that you get these 12 morons, and I don't know how else to explain it. In fact, there was a really good attorney out of San Francisco in the 50s. He said, I consider the jury system to be something of a joke. Well, it is, because what you've got on grand juries who indict and trial juries who convict, they're all, upstanding pillars of the community, none of whom have ever been through the meat grinder and understand how corrupt and rotten and upside down this system is. Now, two guys down in Texas, odd that you should mention Texas, that had felony convictions, they managed to get on a grand jury down there, and instead of the usual 99.1% indictments, the prosecutor was only getting 80% of the people indicted. 20% of them, they were no billed, which was the exact statistic that we had in this country prior to all this, keep the convicted felons off the jury crap in 1830. I mean, that's basically what it should be. About 1 out of every 5 indictments shouldn't be issued. But since you've got all these people who have the intelligence, when it comes to the legal system, of stacks of furniture, then yeah, they'll just indict anything that comes along, including a ham sandwich.
Well, let's stay on the judges for a moment. Judges frequently issue rulings designed to make law rather than adjudicate disputes in the law. This is judicial activism, and it is clearly unlawful. Yet, judges get away with it all the time. Is this due to a lack of will to prosecute judges, or are there other reasons why judges are pretty much allowed to do whatever they want in their own courtroom?
Well, here's the other reason, Brent. Anytime you go to a member of Congress, and there's exceptions, okay? I beat John Ashcroft in the BATF a few years back by using this particular method. Anytime you go to a member of the federal Congress, and this would also go true at state court, state reps, and you ask them to do something about judicial corruption or government agency that's out of line, whatever, they'll give you this separation of powers nonsense. Like, oh, well, we can't touch the judges because under the separation of powers, as found in the U.S. Constitution, which is what they'll tell you, we can't do anything about the judiciary. Well, that's crap for 2 reasons, okay? First is the word separation of powers found nowhere in the Constitution. Second is, and it's unfortunate no members of Congress understand how to read a Constitution, the Constitution. If you go to Article 3, Clause 2, Section 2, it plainly tells you the Supreme Court and all inferior courts, which is, of course, were created by Congress, shall conduct themselves according to such regulations as Congress shall make. Well, if I'm making regulations for you, that's not separation of powers. You don't have judicial immunity. You don't have judicial independence. If I'm making the rules for you, I'm your boss. And none of these morons in Congress these days seem to understand that, with the exception of Roy Blunt, who's the one I went to beat John Ashcroft. I lost a case in 4 federal courts over a 3-year period. Nobody read anything that my partner and I submitted. We won it in Roy Blunt's office because he did what he was supposed to do in 6 weeks.
He did what he was supposed to do. Isn't that amazing? Comment from, when we have to say that, isn't that amazing? It should be the norm, not the exception. From Spencer in the chat room, it seems to me that law enforcement, in quotes, has no business existing. It used to be peace officers. Law enforcement is tyranny and enforcement of dictatorship. Anyone?
Agreed.
What's in a name, I guess?
Say again, Ken?
I said, what's in a name, I guess? I like the idea that somebody is looking out for the peace and safety of the citizenry, but if they had a mindset more toward keeping the peace than they did enforcing the law, or worse, showing their authority, we'd have a better police force today.
Yeah, I think it's true. Also, I think that's true. Also, and also just the word enforcement. It's something really nasty about it. Let's find out a little bit about what our panelists are doing. Mike Brown, let's start with you. You have written a new book, and I wouldn't even begin to go down the list of your accomplishments, books, and columns over the years. But your new book, which I just got through, Defending a Drug Case. Why don't you tell us something about that?
Well, basically, it starts off showing you, okay, here's the way the legal system is supposed to work. Here's the issues you're supposed to adjudicate. I took a case pro bono for a guy named Demetrius Flannery. He's known as Big Meech. He's been in books. He signed a movie deal, that sort of thing. Guy's got 1 million followers. He was the Robin Hood of the ghetto. Any kid in the ghetto needed clothes, shoes, books for school. He just gave them the money by the tens of thousands. Did this for 20 years. Caught a case out of Detroit he really wasn't good for. His own attorney sweated him for 3 years until he broke and took a plea bargain. I kept lying to him. And so when I did his motion to vacate sentence, and I predicted right at the beginning of it, okay, these are what the issues are, but I know what you're going to do, you scumbag federal judge. And he did. I mean, he did exactly everything I predicted, but then I also showed, all right, now, if you want to take this one step further, which no lawyer will do, in fact, even the ones I work for won't do it, I make them nervous sometimes, you can very easily take a case from the court system into the legislature, because the highest authority on the law and the Constitution, federal or state, federal Constitution, state Constitution, is not the United States Supreme Court. It's not your state Supreme Court. It's the legislature. And it's very simple. You got a member of the legislature who won't do what he's supposed to do. And I've basically got this outlined in the book. You just go with him to about, let's say he won his last election by 360 votes. Let's say he's a state legislature. You go to him with a petition with 500 names and addresses on it of registered voters in his district and say, okay, chump, here's the deal. You're either going to do what we want you to do, or we'll get somebody else the next go-round who will. Amazing how you can get their attention that way. Now, and I didn't do that with Roy Blunt. He just did his job anyway.
Which, again, when you tell me that, it's like I'm almost in shock when I hear that. And, you know, it should be the other way around. I should be in shock when they don't do their jobs. Mike, what's the best way for people to find out information about your new book and about the work that you do? Well, there's probably the best source would be Peter Simpson. That's area code 320-857-2400. If he also has a website, www.rommellaw.com. But if you get on the Internet, there's more than one outfit that sells my books. If you put in Defending a Drug Case, the Criminal Defendant's Bible, Brown's Lawsuit Cookbook, they'll pop up all over the place. And then you also have a website, MikeBrownSolutions.com? Yeah, but I don't have anything legal on it, because what wound up happening years ago is that I got everybody and his dog that thought because they bought a book from me, they were entitled to 3 hours of legal consultation. So, I mean, I do not deal directly with the public in that respect. But people can at least find out more information about you and what you're doing and such by going up there at MikeBrownSolutions.com, right? Well, they can get in touch with me, but if you go to that website, stuff I do for my son. We sell steam engines. So the other one would be Rommel Law. Is that correct? That's the best. Yeah, that's the best one. There's also one out of St. Charles, Missouri, BrownsLegalResearch.com. Yeah, let's not confuse everybody. Let's stick with Rommel Law, R-O-M-M-E-L, RommelLaw.com. And we'll give that info out again before we get to the end of the show. Kenneth Bunting. Hey, you have a laundry list of credentials and experience. You're the executive director of the National Freedom of Information Coalition, www.nfoic.org. Can you tell us something about the coalition?
I'd love to. The NFOIC, the National Freedom of Information Coalition, and I know that's a mouthful, that's why we're at NFOIC.org. We are a nonpartisan network of state and regional organizations whose sole purpose is advocating for open government and government transparency and accountability. Part of our core work is public education and advocacy. Another key component of my part of this work is keeping the state coalition strong, because we focus primarily on the state and local access laws. I mean, there are a lot of other organizations in the field working for transparency in government and dealing primarily with the federal FOIA. But we are the only one whose primary focus is on at the state and local level. I think the problems with a lack of transparency in government are similar at all levels of government, because a lot of it has to do with the fact that those who run the government don't realize that when the records that they have in their hands, the instruments of government, all the written instruments and all the meetings they hold are held for the people that they work for. If they just started with the mindset that these are your records and you can have them, I'd be out of a job. But unfortunately, the mindset in the bureaucracy at all levels is just the opposite. And we spend a lot of time fighting disclosure battles, even when the law is clear. one of our signature programs is that we also have a legal fund that encourages citizens to aggressively assert their access rights. We don't pay attorney's fees, but under most of the state and local FOI laws around the country, if you bring a righteous case and win, you get your fees and attorney fees back. So it's called a Knight FOI Fund. It is the one grant we offer that is not just limited to our state and regional coalitions. Anyone can apply. And basically, if you're trying to get open records that were wrongly denied you because someone in the bureaucracy didn't want to follow the law, we're there to assist you with the Knight FOI Fund.
Excellent. And again, that website is nfoic.org.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. Carolyn Roth, you set up Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability in 2010. I'd imagine you've had a lot of work to do with this organization, that there's been a lot of activity going on. Can you tell us a bit more about the group?
Well, we started as a Facebook group, essentially, to gather support because we were trying to start a petition to have the particular ranger that I mentioned earlier in the show fired. And, since we weren't successful in that, what we came to is that we are wanting to start basically a citizen review committee modeled after the review committee in Portland, Oregon. Portland has seen a lot of well-publicized issues with police brutality, including a fatal shooting. And, we live, I'm in Southern Oregon, which is a small rural community with very little police accountability. And the stories are so numerous that I decided that I had to do something. And so our eventual goal is to start a citizen review committee. Currently, our group can be found on Facebook, the Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability. And essentially, we're trying to gather support to do that right now. We have a gubernatorial candidate who has joined our group, and we're basically just gathering support towards the committee.
Which candidate?
His name is, let's see, what is he going with? I apologize.
Oh, did I surprise you there?
You did. I should have written it down. He just started supporting us, like, literally a few days before the show. So, but I can...
That's okay. But that's great. That's great that you have, a gubernatorial candidate coming on board. And if people want to find out more about Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability, they can go to Facebook and just put that in the search engine, Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability. Do you work with other states as well? Because I know there are a lot of these types of groups around.
Well, we have members of the group that are not all inside of Oregon, and we're in contact with people, but we don't have like a specific connection to any other group at this time. However, I'm open to those connections.
Yeah, I meant that you're open to working together, and together we are much greater than we are individually. Well, thank you. Excellent, Carolyn Roth. Now, we've been talking problems, and we clearly have a long laundry list of problems. Now, I want to take a look at solutions, both the solutions that are supposed to be in place, and then maybe we can go out on a little bit of a fantasy trip and see if we can come up with our own creative solutions as well. Let's start with politicians. Kenneth Bunting, in Congress, there exists an oversight committee, which currently has hundreds of cases pending in which no action has yet been taken. Is the oversight committee at all effective? It's supposed to take a look and put politicians in their places when they get out of them. Also, is that the only recourse available to the public to hold political representatives accountable to their oaths of office?
Well, I think, and we all know that the biggest accountability tool that the public has is the ballot box. Unfortunately, we get to use it only every 2 years, not every day. Those of us in the open government community were quite encouraged when our Representative Issa took over the oversight committee. He had been a friend of open government. He spoke often about the need for transparency. There was some concerns by some people, given the partisan nature of Congress at the time, that it was going to turn into a witch hunt for people of the opposite party. To his credit, that has not happened. But I would still like to see the Oversight Committee and every part of Congress more open and transparent. You know, I have opined that this new super committee that involved of 6 senators and 6 representatives could be a great example for legislative bodies at every level if they would just decide to do everything out in the open, all the decisions that should be made available online in real time, all the witness lists of the people who are coming to talk to them should be available in advance of the actual meeting, and all of their deliberations, real deliberations, not dog and pony shows, should be there for everybody to see. It would be a great example for the American people. It would probably get the process moving. It would probably break the stalemate if the sunshine was on that committee. Unfortunately, politicians all give great lip service to openness and transparency and accountability. They all do. I mean, if you did a man in the street interview with voters, they would say the same thing. But it's an issue with passive support. My solution for Congress and for the voters is to get excited about open government. Your government belongs to you. Every record they create belongs to you, and you have a right to it. And if I could get everybody so excited so it was a front burner issue in every election, every time, I think we'd be better off.
And I have to chime in here because I know there are listeners who are going to be thinking what I'm about to say. While I agree that in theory, the ultimate power of the people rests in the ballot box, Joseph Stalin, said something very, very significant. He said, it matters not who votes. What matters is who counts the votes. And today, we no longer have paper ballots. We no longer have citizen oversight in polling places. So in all honesty, unless we're willing to trust our government officials, those same officials that we spent the last hour and a half talking about the problems, and the fact that they're liars and that they say one thing and do something else, unless we're willing to trust them, we have no real way of knowing whether our vote has been properly counted. How do you address that?
You know, I'm not sure I can solve that problem for you, but I'd like to take it a step further. I think, and this is something that your listeners should be alarmed about. Around the country, there have been a number of voter suppression laws getting passed in state after state. I think every voter should have a right to go out and cast his ballot, and government should be working to make sure that every single voter gets a chance to exercise the franchise, and that every vote that is cast gets counted. So wherever there are abuses that limit voter enfranchisement, and whenever there's abuses that raises questions about the validity of elections, we ought to all be concerned and alarmed.
All right. Now, let's move over to the judiciary. Mike Brown. A process exists to review behavior by members of the judiciary. Okay? You've talked about judicial councils. You've talked about, oversight. How effective is the existing process in its current form? And can a similar process be developed to address inappropriate behavior by, say, police and political officials?
Well, the answer to the last question is yes. We already have that process. It's called the Federal Civil Rights Action, Title 42, United States Code, Section 1983. Problem is, we're back to the problem with the judges, whereas they're not doing their jobs. Now, as far as the members of Congress go, it's fairly simple for a member of Congress who actually has the cojones to do his job. All a member of Congress has to do, and Gerald Ford proved this back in 1969, you want to wreck a misbehaving federal judge? You bring a bill of impeachment against him. It doesn't matter if he's impeached or not. It's in his personnel file. And he gets a couple of those, and he's not ever going to sing with the Supremes in the Emerald City or anything like that. And then the other problem that you've got is that with these judges, oh crap, there goes the telephone again, I can't get to it, is that every single time, and there doesn't seem to be any exceptions, that Congress enacts a statute to rein these characters in, who do they appoint to take care of the problem? Other judges. I mean, this isn't just letting the fox into the hen house. This is letting, basically the whole bunch of them. In other words, you cannot go to a group of people known for dishonesty, and I'm not just talking about federal judges, just like the old expression, it's only 97% of the lawyers that give the rest of them a bad name. You've got people in one of the most dishonest professions, and I only work for 3 lawyers. 97% of them I won't work for because they're liars, they're frauds, they're cheap, they're slugs, they're incompetent. I mean, I can show you case after case where somebody got sold down the river because of some lawyer. Now, come on. You take some guy who's incompetent, who's a human slug, and that's at least 4 out of 5 of them, and you put a black robe on them, and all of a sudden, they're your honor? You know, excuse me? What they really need to do is they need to have a major house cleaning like they had in England in 1340. The judges had made such a mess of everything. The Parliament, the English Parliament, appointed commissioners, moved them all out of place. The commissioners straightened everything out, and things got back to normal. Well, hopefully we're not too far away from that.
That would be something. All right, I want to go on a speculative journey now, and I'm going to ask all 3 of you this, and we've got to be real quick because we're running out of time. What would it be like if suddenly we flipped the switch and all government officials were held strictly and personally liable for any excesses or violations they perpetrated, even if they did so out of ignorance? That cop did something that he's not supposed to do to you. He's got to pay for it out of his own pocket, not out of the taxpayer coffers. Carolyn, start with you.
Well, I think things would definitely function very differently. I don't know, we definitely need a higher level of accountability. And there has to be some protection to our civil servants being, reasonable here, but we see that protection, being abused. So I think that accountability at that level would certainly change personal behavior. Citizens are held personally accountable for their actions. We pay out of our own pockets when we do something that we're not supposed to. So I think that bringing that accountability, to the police, for example, would make serious changes in the actions that they're making.
Okay. Kenneth, same question. I can't address it as a legal expert. I think that if there were personal culpability and consequences for misbehavior, then government officials who misbehave might be less inclined to do so. I agree with it. At the same time, I've heard the defense of why public officials should not be broke because they made a mistake, as opposed to maliciously and intentionally violated the law. I will tell you, though, one of the things I run across in the open government arena is I wish citizens would get alarmed. If I live in a small town and I find out that after 5 months after a good citizen walked in and asked for a couple of documents that the law clearly says they should have had, my city council had to write a check for $50,000 to them, which is my tax money. Public outrage might help a little bit, too. Yes, personal liability would help, but I wish there were more public outrage when there are violations, particularly of transparency laws, and they are, the Knight Commission suggested that 7 out of 10 governments at all levels are serial violators of the very statutes they write about open government.
Now, I know it's fantasy, Mike. I understand that. But give me a break for a moment and let me go there. What if we could hold all those judges, all those scrapings, liable, personally liable for their excesses?
So you're talking judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, bureaucrats.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay.
Why not? We're liable for our actions. Why shouldn't they be?
Well, Brent, it all sounds good in theory, but I have one question for you. Where do we get the money to build all the prisons to put these people in?
Well, I thought about that. That raises a very, very, very good question. Actually, I don't have an answer for that. All right, final general question. Since it's unreasonable to expect Congress, honest to God, to ever really enact legislation to make its own members personally liable for their own lies and misrepresentations, do we have any other options to hold political, judicial, and executive branch officials to the same laws with which the rest of us are expected to comply? Mike?
Like I said earlier in your broadcast, Brent, You want to change the laws? You change the lawmakers. It's that simple.
Kenneth?
Public engagement and paying attention. I used to get angry. I'm a left-leaning Democrat, but I used to get angry with the notion when Nixon was in trouble that people said out loud and commentators on TV repeated, well, they've all done the same thing. I'm not sure that was true. I think, there were things caught on tape that would have resulted in a 15 or 17-year jail sentence for other people that were different than others. I think we've got some good people in public office, but the public's best remedy for the bad people in public office is to pay attention, be engaged. Our views are going to vary from time to time, but we should all know whether or not we're voting for somebody who's honest, who does what he says he's going to do, who works in the public interest or in the interest of the special interest. And if he's the bad guy who's working for a rich lobbyist as opposed to your own interest, vote him out.
And Carolyn, would you comment on that? What options exist if Congress doesn't change the laws to hold the police to the same laws they hold us to?
Well, I think that, that the police being overseen by the lawmakers, it is very important to go into researching who your lawmakers are, researching what they support, and not just reading the blurb in your voter's pamphlet, researching and voting accordingly.
It sounds like all of you are saying the same thing. People need to become more involved. They need to do more than just sit down and watch their weekly American Idol or whatever else it is. They've just got to get involved. All right, final comments from each of you. Carolyn, we'll start with you.
Well, I did want to mention really quick that it's actually a candidate for the Oregon House of Representatives who is supporting our organization. He goes by Governor John, which is a little confusing, and his website is johnparkerforhouse.web.com. And we just hope that people will start paying more attention to what's going on, in the issues of police accountability, and we hope that they're speaking up in their local area. There are review boards, there are politicians who do care, and we just encourage people to be more active and pay more attention.
Excellent. Kenneth Bunting, final comments.
Well, it's your government. It belongs to you, and our founding fathers do.
Wait a moment. If it's my government, I'll just make the rules. Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nothing more important to you than information about what your government is doing to and for you. Get angry, get excited, stand up for open, transparent government. Nothing is more important to a democratic society.
And again, that's why we have rants and raves. That's why I tell people, get outraged. Mike Brown, final word with you.
Well, I think the main thing people need to understand is that the final authority on the Constitution of the United States, or even your state constitution, is not the judges, it's not the members of the legislature, it's the people who put them in there or threw them out. In other words, you don't like the way that the judges interpreted the Constitution, you go to your member of Congress. You don't like the response you get from him, throw the bum out, get another bum.
Excellent. Panelists, I want to thank you all for being with us. This has been a spectacular discussion. Hopefully, we've planted some seeds and inspired some people out there to change things for the better. Contact information, again, Carolyn Roth, Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability. Go to Facebook and put that in, Oregon Citizens for Police Accountability, and you can get in touch there. Kenneth Bunting, www.nfoic.org. That stands for the National Freedom of Information Coalition. And America's Judge Buster, Mike Brown, www.rommellaw, ROMMEL, rommellaw.com. Panelists, thank you so much. God bless you all. And please keep up your respective great work.
Brent, thanks for having us, and thanks for your passion.
Absolutely. It's been such an absolute pleasure to have you.